Nuno and João are partners from the Walking Mentorship, and they bring the inside look in the life of the people they walk with. The podcast Keep Walking With Me searches for potential solutions towards the best version of ourselves. Every month, we walk together with a guest. There is a disclaimer that needs to be shared. After listening to this program, you might feel the urge to step outside and go for a long walk. But don't worry, that is absolutely normal. Welcome to the podcast Keep Walking With Me. Today we have another very special guest walking and talking with us. So let's start and ask, in a nutshell, who is Steven MacGregor?
Hi there, Joao. Great to join you today. A couple of ways to answer that. I guess on one level, I'm a recovering academic. I studied design thinking with a background in engineering, and for, I'd say, 20 years now, I've been working in the field of workplace well-being, trying to elevate well-being as a more strategic concern within the busy world of work.
All right. Well, thank you.
That's a good opening. Well, you are obviously very closely related to the term Chief Wellbeing Officer. That's something very close to you. So we would love to have your description or your take on what is exactly a Chief Wellbeing Officer and what impact it has.
Sure. So, within that 20-year journey, I've tried to, as I say, make well-being more central to how an organization generates value, how it creates a more positive culture. And Chief Wellbeing Officer, so that's a platform that I started and a brand about 2017. It was just ahead of releasing the book of the same name in the summer of 2018. And even if I think back to the first book, so I've written 3 books in the space. There's been a trilogy of books in this space, let's say, of well-being and performance. The first book was called Sustaining Executive Performance because I didn't feel that I had permission to use the word well-being within the context of work. I felt that many people looked at that as a compromise on performance. So Chief Wellbeing Officer, the book and the brand that came out a few years later, it was a kind of a polemic in a way. It wasn't necessarily arguing to say, let's have a Chief Wellbeing Officer within a company, although that could be the case. It was taking this word well-being, which was a kind of a soft or connotations of something that is very soft and at the margins of value generation, but then putting the 2 most serious business words on each side. And I've had many interviews over the years from journalists around the world saying, look, Chief Wellbeing Officer, what does it mean? And I think, look, it can mean different things depending on the context of that organization. But at the very basic level, it is just taking well-being a bit more seriously within how we generate value within an organization. It's about how we treat people more like human beings and not just as resources, and with all the benefits that come from that, right? I mean, even on a client conversation just a couple of days ago, we were talking about how busy the people are. And when people are very busy and demands are really high, the temptation is to take what people think is the shortcut and sacrifice themselves in terms of sacrificing their health and well-being. But what I think we know now, but we still have to bang the drum, let's say, is that the path towards results, the path towards performance is via health and well-being. It's about taking care of ourselves. It's not about sacrificing ourselves. So I think, coming back to, again, the question, a Chief Wellbeing Officer should be a champion for showing that results, doing great work, isn't separate from better health and better well-being within the workplace.
Well, that's probably easier for us to ask the next question, because over the years, maybe you can share with us maybe some examples of organizations in which the Chief Wellbeing Officer had a positive impact. Is that, like 1 or 2 stories that maybe you want to pinpoint to us?
Yeah, and again, coming back to even over the years, and I had one quite recently with a big US newspaper. They were asking me, it's often the million-dollar question, you know, which organization does this well? Where do we have a great example of a chief wellbeing officer? You know, maybe it is the sad reality that the term still, even though, you know, it started to get a lot of attention when I wrote that book in 2018, it still isn't mainstream, Joao, right? It's still far from being the norm. But what I would say is that you get examples of, first of all, not always organizational wide, but within teams. So you get examples of high performing teams where there's a great degree, let's say, of psychological safety, where people have those close working but also human relationships, and they get, you know, they're able to sustain that performance, and they have a good time also, and a good experience of work. I think the whole issue of experience of work is something within this conversation as well. So on one hand, it's hard for large organizations to have that culture of care and of well-being across the whole complexity of a large organization, but within teams you can identify it. And then also in terms of functions, then I think instead of saying, because, you know, we don't really have mainstream roles of chief wellbeing officer in large organizations anyway, you get them a lot in startups, I think. I've been in stealth mode myself for a year and a half, and that's the role that I have as chief wellbeing officer. So you do see them in smaller companies. But I think you do see the attributes of what we would like in a chief wellbeing officer within other roles, and that could be in HR, it could be in learning and development, it could be in different areas within an organization, and it's thinking about having that real culture of care for teams, being a leader who has that curiosity for people, has that high degree of empathy, but also, you know, looks at the development of a person as well. And even going back to things like servant leadership, you know, the post-pandemic world is crying out for the attributes of a servant leader. And this was a framework that was created over half a century ago. So I think it's difficult to pinpoint organizations and examples of chief wellbeing officers as a role, but I think you can see signals on a team level and within different functions of an organization.
Well, then I just cannot resist to ask, after your answer, it shouldn't be that the chief wellbeing officer should be the CEO of the company?
That would be amazing, you know, that would be amazing, you know, if they had, yeah, it could be. Look, maybe that's the goal, Joao, right? Maybe that's the goal.
I just heard your explanation. I was thinking, that sounds to me like a great CEO of a company.
And look, and I think, you know, and I've come into contact with CEOs over the years who have had a lot of those attributes, right? So look, it depends how you want to use the word, right? I mean, sometimes, you know, I'll have client conversations and we don't even use the word well-being. We just talk about a flourishing kind of working life. We talk about care, collective care within an organization. We talk about positive performance or positive organizations. We talk about sustainable performance. And sometimes the word well-being isn't even used, right? So maybe we don't need to use it, right? But you know, I think we need to use it to gain traction and to highlight some of these attributes. Yeah. But yeah, I've met some CEOs who would make fantastic chief wellbeing officers, but I still think it's the case we have a perception problem, so that if you mention the word well-being, or if you even say chief wellbeing officer, a lot of folks think it's nothing to do with a thriving organization in terms of being competitive, let's say. And then maybe they think about wellness. And I think the automatic assumption when you mention the word wellness is that it's something separate from work. It's something that you do outside of the workplace.
Well, we could definitely have a long conversation just on that.
Yeah, but actually connecting to that, let's say resistance from the workplace to kind of work with this concept, if we could establish a connection with the bottom line, I mean, if we could demonstrate that actually you will improve your bottom line by investing and caring for people, that would be a big help. Do you have any like good examples where that can become evident, and you can actually use them to say, no, this is actually working towards your investors, your shareholders, your bottom line in the end.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's another one of these big questions, Nuno, on ROI, the business case. I mean, essentially in that first book that I mentioned on sustaining performance, it was looking at what is the business case for all of these different initiatives. And you have research which backs up, a lot of the kind of individual elements of well-being, let's say, or positive culture, that it shows that it does drive higher performance. When you get to just the complex, again, it comes down to things like the complexity of an organization. It comes down to how do you define well-being. There have been studies on well-being programs. So what are some of the well-known ones from Johnson & Johnson? So a lot of the corporate athlete methodology from Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz in a high performance. Johnson & Johnson then bought that center and then tried to kind of implement a lot of these methodologies with other organizations. So they looked at well-being programs and the return on investment, and it was like, times 2.4 on the dollar for the spend. But even a well-being program, I think, is quite narrow. And then I think you can even highlight like the Google study, right? That looked at, what is the biggest element or the most important factor for high-performing teams. And it was that degree of psychological safety, right? And sometimes organizations will not even have psychological safety in the same space as well-being, but to me, it is absolutely part of well-being, right? So if you invest in psychological safety of your team, you're creating that culture of care. People feel more well, and we know that drives higher performance in teams. So we have, again, pieces of the puzzle, and I think the logic is there, right? I think in terms of, especially post-pandemic, organizations and leaders, they have to recognize, how do people recover? How do they maintain performance in the longer term? How are they more engaged without burning out? You need the tools of well-being. They absolutely have a business case there. So I think you would appeal to the logic of any organization and say, look, you have to do this, but you also have to be committed. It's not something that, has to be strategic. It's not something that you just run a little side program and then hope that it works, and then also give it maybe a responsibility to a kind of junior member of the team, but you have to commit to this. You have to make it strategic, and it absolutely will reap dividends, and significant dividends.
Oh, and I guess, Steven, that one of the best ways to improve our well-being is through music. So maybe this is a great time for you to give us your first song, and maybe you want to explain why.
So I'm a big believer in this, right? In my latest book, I talked about desert island discs. It's an exercise that we often run in programs, so I'm fully on board, and even the time machine that music gives us, right? So I'm going to give it a little bit of kind of chronological order. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite songs when I was a teenager. So I guess around the age of 13, when I started to become much more aware of music, and maybe that was becoming more aware of girls as well at the same time, I don't know, but the song is Fool's Gold by the Stone Roses. And I love that song, and I think it goes well with walking. So in the video for Fool's Gold, and some of the lyrics as well, they're walking in the hills. I don't know if it's in the Scottish Highlands or somewhere, but a fantastic and very influential Manchester band. And that's my first song, Fool's Gold by the Stone Roses.
All right, let's go back then to the Stone Roses. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. Definitely, that's a good memory. It was good to walk with them again. I guess that we both share the love for teaching. I mean, we are both university teachers. So I would like to ask you if you think universities are doing their part in creating, let's say, a more wholesome work environment, or maybe in another angle, if you believe universities should have a chief well-being officer as well.
It's a great question. I said at the beginning, in a jokey sense, but it is kind of true that I'm a recovering academic. So my time within the university setting is becoming less and less over the years. There's two things here, I think, Joel, that you could look at. Are you going to look after the kind of students and look at their well-being, and also the staff, right? And what is the culture as an academic within a university?
Yes.
I think there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of, pressure with publishing, especially for academics, and a lot of uncertainty, let's say, within that sector these days in terms of the role of higher education. But I think maybe the bigger role is on students, right? And so, especially at the age where they attend university, again, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of maturing that has to happen. Going to university, and I've had this discussion before with when I went to Qatar for the World, the WISE Summit, the Innovation and Education Summit in Doha, and we talked about how going to university is less about learning knowledge, but it's more about learning to be an adult. And so, because of a lot of those very formative years, like our teenage years, maybe, then I think there is a huge role for looking at well-being in greater depth, right? So I think on one level, yeah, I think there should be kind of courses, let's say, core courses on well-being, certainly for students. And a chief wellbeing officer would be an absolutely great idea. My main affiliation these days, Joao, was with the Glasgow School of Art, which is a fantastic organization, but they have had real trauma in recent years. The building, which was a very famous building in Scotland, designed by Charles Rennie Mackintosh, burned down twice in the last 10 years or so. So, the staff there have had real issues. But, I've got an honorary professorship there, and I've been talking a lot to them about the role of well-being, and they have a role. Actually, it's not called the chief wellbeing officer, but it is looking at student welfare, and it's looking at how we can think about the experience for students and how we can look after their mental health. So I think this is something that's absolutely going to be more and more important within the university context in the coming years.
Wow, thank you.
That's really room for thought there. We know that you were a beneficiary of the Scottish International Educational Trust, right? So a trust set up by Sir Sean Connery to support Scottish talent that needed financial aid. And you mentioned that you feel still the long-term impact of such a support. How do you think we can improve scholarships and trusts so that we can make sure that all talent has the opportunity to flourish?
It's a great question. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, it was leaving home, right? It was just going global. It was appreciating the opportunities that were out there, right? So rather than having this very narrow view in Scotland and the UK, suddenly I was in the west coast of the US, and I was just everything was so open. And so it comes down to that openness, right? I mean, the financial support was important, but it was more the kind of bridge building. And I think even things like Erasmus over the years has been so important for people around Europe, and which is such a shame that Brexit happened for the UK. So a lot of the universities and a lot of the institutions in the UK, they're no longer part of Erasmus. And so the mobility of students is much reduced. Look, I'm no expert in this field, right? In terms of what do we need to do? I mean, there's a whole financial, political context there, but I think it's just relationship building, right? And it's, can we get beyond the kind of, I don't know, is there competitiveness issues there? But I think, I've always been trying to bridge build between institutions. So even some of the business schools here in Spain, I've always tried to make connections to, like Glasgow School of Art and other places around the UK that I know. So I think it's just that, is going into that with thinking, okay, what can we gain from, student exchange? What can we gain from, combining perspectives, joint research projects? Yeah, I don't know. It's just the spirit of bridge building and openness, I think, and new energy, right? I think students especially, if you even think about what happens to a town or a city when there is a university there, it gives it that every academic year, it gives it that influx of energy and that freshness. And I see it in Glasgow. I usually, I live in Barcelona, but I go back to Glasgow every summer. And I see it happening with the University of Glasgow and all thousands of these students coming from all over the world. And it gives the city that real jolt of energy, right? And that's just so important.
Absolutely. And you also referred the fact that when you, at least for a while, you fit into someone else's shoes, you actually gain a different perspective, and it's very hard then to go back to the original format. And being myself an exchange student, finish high school very far away from home, it actually helped me tremendously to understand that the world definitely, it's much closer to your heart, and what unites us is definitely much more than what supposedly divides us, which I'm not even sure it's the right word. But shifting gears, we know that in the beginning of January, so just probably a little bit more than a month ago, you published the Daily Reset, and we would like you to share with us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So this was this was the third in the kind of trilogy of health and well-being books, Joao, and it was published originally in December 2021, but towards the towards the end of last year, I had been working on a revision in terms of just some fresh writing and typos and things. But then I realized that because I had written it in the shadow of the pandemic, it was overly focused on the pandemic. So I just decided to kind of rip it apart and make a kind of, a real thorough revision. So it's based on the original Daily Reset, but it is substantially different. And so the whole format of the Daily Reset is just to try and make health, well-being, leadership content more accessible. So for every day of the year, there is a nudge, and that is in the form of a reflection, a method, a scientific study that allows people to kind of implement well-being in their daily lives. And so for each month of the year, there are different themes. So January has the theme of movement, physical movement, which fits very well with our conversation with your podcast, and February is habits. We have other themes like purpose and community and leadership. And so there's 366 different reflections or nudges within that book.
Well, sounds like a great book to buy, because it's still the beginning of the year.
Exactly.
Take advantage.
Very good to inspire us. Well, and speaking about inspiration, and this is kind of shifting a little bit towards a different scope of our conversation, kind of unfair questions, let's put it this way, but what is something that gives you hope?
I guess my son has just turned 9 years old, and it's kind of similar to our conversation on, when students come into a new academic year and it gives it that new influx of energy. And even thinking about the content of the Daily Reset, as we get older in our lives, we tend to follow the same patterns of thinking and doing. And now and again, we need to just do something new, do something for the first time. And then when I look at my son, he's doing a lot of things for the first time, right? And it's just a constant inspiration. As I get older, that you can always learn something new, and you can always have that experience of freshness, let's say. And I've been thinking about that even the last day or two, because we just got back from a family ski trip And it was like the first trip. So I only started learning to ski when I was like 40. I'm now 47. And even just in the last 3 years has been the first time that I've had more than 2 days a year, just with 1 week a year in the Alps. So I feel that I'm getting better, finally, right? But he's 9 and he's better than me already. So, and the only slight advantage that I have is I can go a little bit faster downhill because of my body weight. But technically, he's already past me. So I'm just hanging on. So hope, I think, is tied to inspiration. It's tied to, how can you be inspired by others who are better, and not take that as a threat. Take that as something that is going to give you that appetite to try and get as close to them as possible. So he's my biggest inspiration, and he looks at me, in a kind of competitive sense. He's always want to beat dad, right? And I'm just trying to hang on. I'm not telling him that, but he's going to take over me and everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that on that note of hope, probably you can give us your second song, and hopefully will give us hope as well.
Okay, so I was going to do one, but since this one maybe sits better with hope, I don't have a huge musical knowledge of classical music, but this is something that I've always loved. So this is Cello Suite Number 1 in G major by Johann Sebastian Bach, and it's just one of those. Even if anyone's listening and doesn't recognize, they've heard of Bach, of course, but even if they don't recognize the title, you'll know this absolutely after you play it. And I had the great pleasure of listening to this live by the great cellist Yo-Yo Ma here in Barcelona a couple of years ago. And I think it's just one of those amazing pieces of music that is part of the kind of patrimony, let's say, of human culture. And I think it's one of those things that absolutely gives us hope.
Well, that's wonderful, because we always advise people to listen to this podcast while walking. So I guess it will take them to a different dimension. Let's enjoy it. Well, thank you, Steven, for sharing such a beautiful piece. And actually, we are kind of, as Nuno said, we are moving and getting closer to nature. That's our hope. So we are curious to know, how is your relationship with nature? Maybe does walking or other activity play a part in it? Or maybe if you have any favorite route to walk and why? I mean, we are very curious about these topics.
Yeah, no, great question. I love being outdoors. I'm in a very privileged position where I live. So every morning, my daily routine is I take my son to school, and his school is situated very near. I call it a mountain. It's not really a mountain, but it's a significant hill. Barcelona goes up to 510 meters, and the natural park of Collserola. So I take him to school and then I go running with my dog. And so I've been a runner most of my life. And so I run in the morning with my old English sheepdog, and you have this beautiful view of the city, and it's amazing. So I spend a lot of time outside. If I'm not running, I'm cycling. I often say to people, so I used to train with I trained with a lot of elite athletes over the years, Tour de France cyclists, Olympic track athletes, and I was a duathlete myself. And people say an international duathlete, and people who don't know what duathlon is, it's triathlon for bad swimmers. So I've done a lot of running. I've done a lot of running and cycling over the years. And I think also two more things in nature is that on one hand, and I wrote about this in my newsletter a couple of years ago, but I got an injury. I ran a marathon here in Barcelona, and I was injured and I couldn't run for like 6 or 7 months. And I was really freaking out, running such an important part of my life for a long time. And then I couldn't do it, right? And I really had a lot of reflections on this, but in the end, it was a real blessing, because what I started to do was walk more, right? And I've always walked, right? But I walked as more of a thing of get to A to B, but I never walked as much for the enjoyment, because for me, the running was the enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was injured, instead of running every morning with my dog after particularly the school run, I would walk, and it was a different experience, right? So you notice different things, and there's different physical sensations and mental reflection. So I'm really grateful for that injury, actually, because now I'll mix it up. I'll run, and I'm grateful for running again. And then other times I walk, and it gives me different things. And I love both. And I think the final thing on the nature piece, I don't mind the elements. And I know that's easy to say because I live in Barcelona, which has got a great climate, but I know what it's like. I lived a long time in Scotland. And so walking and other activities outside when it's pouring with rain, or when it's a hurricane, gale, or snowing, I love that. I think for me, that's part of engaging with nature. I'm not scared of that, right? I embrace the elements.
That's a great way to, as we usually say, there's no bad weather, just bad choice of gear.
Clothing, exactly.
So if you had to choose one, what would be your number one goal in life?
Goal.
Yeah.
Look, to be happy, right? But collectively, for my family, to be happy and to be fulfilled. I think that has to be number one, right? It's not about me and my own. It's about, the collective.
You couldn't be happy alone, for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how do you hope people will describe you?
I think it's someone that inspires them to change, someone that inspires them to try and keep moving forward and to be better. That's good for me. And so in my teaching and in my writing, I try to just, that's the main thing. There's a whole context there of health and well-being and performance, but in the end, I think it comes down to some of those things that we've talked about in terms of keeping moving forward, and not to kind of be stuck, but to keep embracing change, embracing new things, experiencing life. So if I can inspire people to just try something new to keep moving forward, then I'm happy with that.
Well, that's the perfect cue for asking you your third and last song, maybe to inspire us.
Well, it's interesting. It does fit within the nature thing. Inspirational wise, it's maybe a little bit atypical, but this is but it's an amazing song. It's an amazing song. So this is a song from a band, a Glasgow band called the Blue Nile, and the song is called Tinseltown in the Rain. And this just reminds me of home. And look, it's about Glasgow being one of the wettest cities in Europe, but just that special nature. And the Blue Nile's a fantastic band. It's just one of these bands that are so influential in the 80s and 90s, but they never really chased commercial success just in its own right. They were just more interested in the art of the music. And so they're super well regarded. A lot of people haven't heard of them because of their approach to their craft. But this is an amazing song.
Yeah, well, let's listen to it and enjoy. thank you very much, Steven, for bringing us such a beautiful song. Actually, I remember maybe 1 or 2 decades ago, out of the blue, I believed someone used the Blue Nile on some soundtrack. I think so, and I went chasing for them, and I can confirm such a, I would say, inspiring band, but keeping such authentic approach to music, and it's quite beautiful. Well, we are reaching pretty much the end of our conversation, but it's still time for 2 or 3 questions that, as Nuno was saying before, I really believe these are the unfair ones, but let's enjoy. So the idea is, if you could take off on any adventure today, so there are no constraints, no limits on whatever, budget, time, what would be that adventure and why?
Look, I think, even though, so if there's no constraints, then I think the I would do the Camino de Santiago with my kid, even though he's a little bit young. So I think that, and just take the time and do the full thing. And that, how long that takes, and if you do it in one. So he would need to be older, and I would need maybe 3 months or something. But yeah, that's always something that's in my head. That would be a great adventure.
Oh, I can vote for that.
Yeah, that's a
With
great
my
adventure
feet.
from Barcelona. It's a beautiful, and for sure it would be, maybe it will be the adventure of your life, because
Yeah.
with your kid it can really make some really deep connection there. So here goes another unfair question, which is, do you think we are missing anything as humans, as a species and as individuals? Are we missing anything or lacking?
Wow. Yeah. Big question. Look, I think we just need to look out for each other a bit more. I think there's too much self-interest, and I count myself in that, right? I think even if you want to look at one of these frameworks that are often used within business and leadership development in terms of mindset, are you operating from a mindset of scarcity or one of abundance? And I think it's human nature that, especially when resources are limited, then the default mode is that we operate from that mindset of scarcity. And I recognize my own patterns of behavior in that, right? So it's, how can we just think more about the collective? It's not easy by any means, but I think that's something that comes to mind.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, Steven, we are close to the end of our conversation. We have one last question. It's one of our favorite ones because it's a classic. We've been trying to repeat it already for 3 years, getting on our 4th year, repeating the same question in the end of the podcast, but I think we just love the answers. So if you had a time capsule, I mean, something that will be sent into the universe, and maybe a year from now, 1 day from now, 1 million years from now, someone or something will open up this time capsule. What message would you like to place inside?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You're going to have to edit out my silence here. Well, I give it some thought.
Well, silence speaks, so
Yeah,
respect.
exactly. Yeah. No, I think there's something that to do with lifespan, maybe, that you dream as if you're going to live forever, but you act as if you know that you're going to die, right? So you have that focus for action, but you dream big, right? You don't limit what you want to achieve, but you get moving on that action. So something around that, I think, as a message, as a call to action. So it's two things, right? You've got the the finite nature of the time that we have. So you have to get moving on doing something, but you shouldn't be limited by how big you want to think and how big you want to dream.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, Steven, thank you so much for making the time to walk and talk with us, sharing so many different aspects of your personal life, your professional life, inspiring us, and hopefully everything wrapped in a way with music, obviously, but in a way that will keep us moving forward towards our best version.
Thank you. Real pleasure talking to you today, gents. Joao, Nuno, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well,
It's been
thank you, Steven.
Such an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Keep Walking With Me. It is a podcast inspired by the walking mentorship experience. Step by step, we walk together towards the best version of ourselves. For more information about our mentoring programs, visit our website walkingmentorship.com.